Hi, I'm Rachel, Cedardale employee, mother of three, and we have Katie Dewey Rosenfeld here, a part of our Wellness Advisory Board. We're going to go over some of the questions that have come in from our members from families that are struggling during the pandemic.
Great, thank you, Rachel. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a licensed mental health counselor and also a registered art therapist. So currently I work in a group practice in North Andover. So I work with lots of families from the Merrimack Valley area. And I've worked within the Merrimack Valley for a very long time in community mental health as well. So I've worked with children and families for many years now.
Great. And Katie, we have some questions for her regarding from our members on some struggles that parents have faced with their children during the pandemic. The first question we have from one of our members is, what do you think are the long-term effects of our kids being socially isolated? Do you anticipate that their social skills will be impeded by this experience?
So I think it's hard to predict long-term effects right now. I think one thing that we know is adolescents have definitely seen a bigger impact than some of our younger kids. I think on a positive note, we need to remember that kids are really resilient. They're actually a lot more adaptable than adults are, and they can actually make change easier. So I know as a professional, a lot of times it's almost easier to work with kids. They are more engaged in sort of making changes. They're not sort of set in their ways or their personality. So the nice thing is, I think that we will see some effects. I think it will really depend on how the pandemic impacted the child. So one thing I would say is it's really just important for families to encourage kids to talk about their feelings and lead by example. So I've encouraged families to sit down at dinner and share about their day, talk about something that was hard that happened, and really talk about what's going well too, because we don't want to only focus on the struggle. I think if we talk openly, it's helpful, but I know that's also a challenge. So sometimes for older kids, encouraging journaling is helpful because they're at least getting a way to get their feelings out. For younger kids, drawing is also really, really helpful. I work with drawing as an art therapist with kids all the time. Just kind of allows them to engage if they can't find the words. So one thing I will say is, if you're worried about some of the long-term impacts, just utilizing resources and getting more help. I think sometimes people don't want to engage in therapy. They want to sort of figure it out and fix it. But honestly, if you're engaging with a professional, doesn't mean there's any failure. I think it shows a lot of awareness and insight into your child's needs. I'm seeing a lot more referrals for kids that have increased anxiety, some with increased depression, because they've been feeling isolated. So working with someone that can help them manage those feelings is really important. And that's, I think, going to be part of the long-term impact, is just really needing to be a lot more aware of how your kids are doing, especially as we're sort of making a transition back.
So communication is key.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's important.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think normalizing talking about behaviors and feelings is really important.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. That makes sense. Another question that we got is, how do you handle feeling the guilt about not adequately being able to help your child fulfill their remote learning activities? For instance, allowing them to work independently because that's really your only option, and then finding out in the after that they didn't finish everything they were supposed to do, and then you feel bad as the parent that you weren't there to help them.
Absolutely. Well, I think, as you know, guilt as a parent is always happening. It's always around. It's normal. I think that this is also new. It's really hard to navigate because as a parent, your child's doing work at home. If you're working, you're also trying to work. There's just a lot going on. And I think one thing I realized as myself as a parent, not as a clinician, but as someone who was working at home and having, a child in school at home, was to learn to let go of some of it, because if she was in school for a full day, I wouldn't be aware of what was going on every minute. And I was almost over engaged in her remote school days because I wanted to make sure, everything was happening when it was supposed to. But she was a lot more independent than I think I gave her credit for. So I was able to back off. I think one thing that we can do is just check in with your child. It's up to them to be honest with you about how much they're doing and what they're doing. But if you feel like there's a concern, I think checking in with your child's teacher is really important. Again, communicating with the school and with your child's teacher. Some kids really struggle with the online piece, and there's a lot of reasons for that. There's so many distractions kind of at home sometimes. So I think a piece of it is really being engaged with the school, because the hope is you're going to be alerted if there's an issue, right? Like your teacher's going to reach out, your child's teacher will reach out. The same way you would be if they weren't finishing work, if they were in person in school 100%. So ultimately, I think we sort of have to let go of some of the guilt, unless you're hearing otherwise from teachers or other people involved with your child. They're probably doing okay. And I think most of the evidence points to the fact that kids aren't going to lose a lot of significant learning or knowledge as a result of the shift. They're going to regain a lot of that, and they're going to be okay. I think, again, the theme is really communicating and, helping your child stay organized as much as you can, but knowing that there's also other people there that are really in charge of making sure they're staying on task and communicating with those people too.
Yeah, it does take a lot. It does take a village. I had that with my 12-year-old. She was falling behind with her teacher, a Zoom meeting. Turns out she was struggling with the technology.
Okay.
Pick up where her missed assignments were on the table, and we all kind of got on the same page. She was back up and running and doing well. So yeah, that communication
Yes.
really seems to be key in all of this.
Absolutely. And the struggles are all over. I mean, I think a lot of kids struggle with the technology piece. Some kids just struggle with not having, help next to them when they would have as with a teacher. And honestly, some parents just might not totally understand what it is their child is doing. I'm thankful my daughter's in first grade because I can help with some of those pieces. But, there's a lot of kids that might struggle and just need to know when to reach out. Again, using resources. There's people at the school that can help with those things. We just have to know when to ask and who to ask.
Yeah. So our next question is kind of a post-pandemic, even though we're kind of still in it, question. Do you find that families are struggling to transition from an empty activity calendar from when, we were in total lockdown to the busy pre-pandemic lifestyle, including sports, we have play dates, birthday parties, things are starting to pick up, and now it's busy, and now we're transitioning from nothing to a lot. Is there a healthy way to go about this, switch?
Yeah, it's really hard. It's weird because it's this weird shift in a lot of ways. I think one thing is really kind of fighting the urge to completely jump back in and really check in not only with your kids around how they feel about kind of re-engaging in all these things, but also check in with yourself and figure out what's your comfort level. Are you ready for all of these things and in what capacity? I think that one of the positives that came out was the pandemic allowed us to really slow down. And I think the important piece is to really reflect on what did you gain as a family during this time, but also acknowledge sort of what were the losses, big and small. Some kids really missed engaging in extracurricular activities or the more social activities. And some are going to want to jump right back in. And some feel really anxious about it because they heard a lot and have a varying level of awareness around what's been going on for the past year. So some kids get really anxious at the thought of going out and being around groups of people because for so long this was something they were told was dangerous ultimately for them.
Yeah.
So I think really checking in around how they feel, But like I said, you're really leading by example as a parent, and kind of easing back in, keeping to routines. Routines are so important for everyone, for us and for our kids. And if you can be more predictable and really help them understand what's expected and what to expect, that's really important. That predictability and that routine is going to help them ease in with a little less anxiety. But also, if it feels like it's a lot, also being okay with saying no to things, feeling like I don't have to go to everything I'm invited to if it's not comfortable for me or comfortable for my child, because we don't want to lose sort of the things we gained, because we had a little less scheduled time, which can be kind of nice.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to hear from parents sort of what's shifted in terms of priorities. Do you jump in, or do you take some time to step back?
Yeah, I think it's a nice balance between the
Mhm.
easing into it, not jumping into everything all at once, and
Yeah,
then
absolutely.
asking the kids. You're right. We have some
Mhm.
here at Cedardale that played junior tennis before everything happened.
Yeah.
I've been talking to the mom. It's been taking them a while. They're 8 and 9, and they're afraid to come back. And then the other day she goes, "They're ready. They're finally
Yeah.
ready." And we signed them up, and they started last week.
Hmm.
Even though they're kids, doesn't mean they're not afraid, or feeling the impact of.
Yeah.
So we do need to take that into consideration.
I agree. I think they took a lot more in, and they pay so much attention. I mean, they hear everything, even the things we don't really know they understand. Um, and they feed off of kind of how we're feeling and how we're doing with it. So that's important too, is as a parent, checking in on how we feel about it. What are we putting out there for our kids to hold on to? And if they are feeling worried, because I think it's at 8 and 9, they get it, to a pretty good extent of what's been going on. So talking with them in a really mature way about, being ready to go back. Okay, what do you need to feel safe in order to engage in this thing that you really like doing? But let's do it so you feel safe and you feel comfortable doing that again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last question we have is taking the focus a little more away from the children and more on the couple, the married couple. Are you finding that couples are struggling with their relationship as they manage being together for long periods of time every day? And these work arrangements that we have now with this working from home, a lot of them aren't changing anytime soon.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips to help couples navigate through this transition?
Yeah. So the big one again, and it feels obvious, but it's sometimes really hard, is just open communication. That's sort of been the theme throughout. Um,
Yes.
it's about feeling comfortable telling your partner what you need and when you need it. I think that one of the biggest pieces that, when I talk with adults about relationships, it's that frustration around like, how does this person just not understand that I need this? And I always just say, well, did you tell them that that's something that you need? And usually it's, well, no, I didn't, but they should know. But that's not the reality most of the time, is you just have to feel confident and comfortable really asserting what your needs are, because you want that person to be able to do the same thing for you. You want to kind of help each other out and be a team. I think that it's tough. I mean, my husband and I both worked from home this past year, and we were lucky because we were able to negotiate our time. Both the kids were home with us. Our jobs were such that we could make it work. But it wasn't always easy. It was, we found practical ways to work out schedules. We ended up putting whiteboards on the refrigerator and writing down our schedules, so we knew, like, okay, I have a meeting at this time, so you can't schedule something during this. And it took a while to sort of navigate and figure out, how do we put the pieces together in a way that works. But really just being open about it, and also, figuring out what needs to be prioritized. But if one person's things seem to be taking too much priority and the other person is feeling like they aren't getting enough time to do X, Y, and Z, that has to be a conversation. And it doesn't have to be an argument. You're just trying to work it out in a way where everyone feels like they're being heard. And honestly, another huge piece is finding time to be by yourself, finding some time away. We talk about self-care a lot in therapy, and I think that people think it's like getting even far away or out of the house and doing something. But it can be really simple, even just, taking some extra time and taking a walk by yourself, taking a little bit of time to engage in exercise. Physical activity is huge, just to help kind of engage your brain in a different way. Just finding some alone time away from everybody is important for everyone. Everyone needs
Yeah,
that.
definitely.
That was huge, I think, for a lot of families, for a lot of couples. I know it was good for me when I realized, you know what, I just need a little bit of time to do this thing I like to do by myself and just have some quiet time. Um, Again, routines help in that way because you can sort of build things in, and then it doesn't build up to a point where you can't take it anymore, you can't manage it. You've built in some of that time. One thing that I've also found is helpful is finding someone else outside of your house, a friend. Maybe it's even a coworker that you're friends with that's also working from home, or doing a hybrid schedule, and just reaching out to them. I sort of have it be like your accountability buddy, like someone that can say, like, have you taken a minute to yourself today?
Mhm.
Check in with. I think checking in with other people that are in a similar place that you are, that's also outside of the house, is really helpful. It helps you see some perspective. It gives you some additional support. um
Don't
I
feel
think
so
we're also
isolated.
say
You
that one.
don't feel so isolated if you have
Exactly.
people.
Yep. Yeah. And it helps re-engage, right? We sort of stopped engaging as much, even virtually, because it becomes everything we do. We need a little bit of a break from it sometimes. So I think reaching out to somebody and having that person, they likely need you to be that person for them just as much. So it really, really helps. Um, but I think too, if you're noticing that there are pieces that are just a real struggle, or that the communication is really challenging, um, engaging to get some outside support or help can be really important. And I think the biggest piece, whether you're reaching out for help for your relationship or for your child or for yourself, it doesn't have to be a long-term thing. We're seeing people want to engage because this has been a really challenging time. It doesn't mean you're signing up and you're going to be doing therapy for, you know, years and years. It means that right now you need extra support, and that can provide that outside perspective, and be really helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Um,
That's it we have for questions. Do you have anything that you want to add on this topic?
I think, again, the biggest thing is communicating with your family, with your friends, and with yourself, really reflecting and taking time to be honest about what you need. Being a parent during this time is really, really challenging. And I can say it from my own personal perspective, from friends, from parents that I work with their kids, or I work with the parent. And the biggest piece is really just being kind to yourself and giving yourself a little bit of a break, because this is a lot to manage, because you're trying to sort of keep yourself afloat while helping other people be successful. So really making sure you're taking time and checking in with yourself, which can be challenging because we feel like we have to take a big part of our day to do that. But just take a couple minutes, just to kind of take a deep breath and see how you're doing. Because then you can really get a sense of, what do I really need, and what do I need, and who can I go to for support, because I don't want anyone to feel like they don't have that and that they're isolated and by themselves.
Great, thank
Yeah,
you.
sure.
Okay, Cedardale Nation, that was Katie. Thank you, and look for her for other wellness topics to come.